The Galactic Council chamber was an awe-inspiring spectacle, a vast domed hall where towering holograms displayed maps of known space. Representatives from every major species occupied their designated seats, their expressions ranging from disinterest to mild amusement. Today's topic was warfare, specifically, the Council's approach to defensive strategies in light of an emerging galactic threat. Among the seated delegates, the humans were a mere footnote, newcomers to the Council, tolerated rather than respected. When the discussion turned to military history, their presence became a source of entertainment. A Zeldar warlord, towering and draped in ceremonial armor, sneered. Human warfare is nothing but organized savagery, a race of primitive apes, clawing at each other over land and resources. Hardly a legacy worth studying. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Brakari, insectoid strategists known for their mathematical precision in war, clicked their mandibles in amusement. Their battles are erratic, driven by emotion rather than logic, hardly a match for the precision of true military minds. Laughter followed. It was clear the Council had already passed judgment. Captain Elias Voss sat quietly, his face unreadable. A diplomat by title, but strategist by experience, he had spent decades studying war, not just as a concept, but as a necessity. When the laughter subsided, he finally spoke. "Amusing," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You belittle humanity's wars, yet your own civilizations have existed in fragile peace for centuries, relying on technology rather than tactics. You call us primitive because we fought to survive. But tell me, if war is so beneath you, why are you afraid of losing one now?" The room grew silent. It wasn't the words that unsettled them. It was the confidence behind them. The Zeldar warlord leaned forward. "Are you suggesting humanity's methods surpass ours?" There was condescension in his tone, but also curiosity. Elias met his gaze without hesitation. "I'm suggesting that if you truly believe human warfare is primitive, you shouldn't fear proving it." A ripple of interest spread through the delegates. Some leaned in, intrigued. The Council had long dismissed humans as militarily insignificant. Yet here was one challenging them outright. "What do you propose?" asked a representative from the Vraxi Dominion, their species known for its tactical rigidity. "A war simulation," Elias said. "A controlled battlefield, where we will compete using tactics alone. You bring your finest strategists, your most elite warriors. Humanity will bring ours." The idea amused them. The Brakari delegate chuckled. "And what would this prove?" "That our wars were never about brute force," Elias replied. "They were about adaptation, ingenuity, survival. You assume victory because you've never fought an enemy like us." The Council members exchanged glances. There was an air of inevitability now. To decline the challenge would be to acknowledge the possibility of defeat. That was something their egos wouldn't allow. The Zeldar warlord grinned, revealing serrated teeth. "Very well, human. We accept." His voice carried a smugness, as if the outcome had already been decided. The terms were established swiftly. A digital battlefield would be created, simulating real war conditions. Each faction would field a team of warriors, humans versus an elite mix of Council forces. The technology disparity would be significant. Humans would use outdated equipment, while the aliens would have the latest advancements. A handicap, though unspoken. Elias simply nodded at the stipulation. It didn't matter. As the meeting adjourned, delegates left with smug amusement, confident in the spectacle to come. Some discussed the inevitable embarrassment humanity would suffer. Others barely paid it any mind. Elias, however, walked away knowing one thing. The real battle had already begun. The simulation was set. A vast, desolate war zone materialized, a battlefield designed to test tactics, strategy, and execution. It wasn't just terrain and weaponry. The simulation adapted to every decision made within it, responding in real time to the forces engaged. The Council's finest warriors stood poised, confident, armored in their species' most advanced combat suits, armed with energy rifles and precision-guided weaponry. Across from them, the human team entered with far less. Standard-issue ballistic weapons, no energy shielding, and outdated armor. By all visible metrics, they were hopelessly outclassed. The Council's silent amusement lingered, certain they were about to witness a swift, humiliating defeat. At the signal, the simulation commenced. The alien forces moved immediately, their formations perfect, their tactics refined through centuries of disciplined warfare. They advanced in strict, predictable lines, a force designed for overwhelming efficiency. The Brakari spread out in coordinated flanks, utilizing mathematical battle algorithms. The Zeldar warriors, relying on brute strength, positioned themselves at the forefront for a direct assault. The Vraxi, specialists in long-range precision, took elevated positions, scanning for easy targets. The humans didn't meet them head-on. They didn't charge or scatter in chaos. They disappeared. Within moments, the battlefield cameras lost visual on most of the human team. They hadn't fled. There was no retreat, no wild scrambling for cover. Instead, they moved like ghosts, slipping between abandoned structures and using terrain as natural blind spots. The aliens hesitated. This wasn't how war was supposed to be fought. Their advanced tracking systems found nothing. The Vraxi sharpshooters adjusted their scopes, searching. A shot rang out. One of the Brakari fell. Confusion spread through the council's ranks. The attack hadn't come from the front. The humans had circled around. Another shot. A Zeldar dropped, not in a full firefight, but through a calculated, precise takedown. The alien forces reacted, breaking formation, shifting to a defensive posture, scanning for an enemy they couldn't see. The Brakari commanders issued rapid-fire commands, recalculating strategies. But the more they adjusted, the worse it became. The humans weren't just attacking, they were disrupting, jamming communications, creating false signals, laying traps in the very pathways the aliens assumed were safe. Their movements weren't erratic, as the Council had once mocked. They were methodical, intentional. Every step was calculated to exploit weaknesses that the aliens hadn't even realized existed. The Zeldar, frustrated, roared and charged forward, believing brute strength could crush the issue. They reached a central building, storming through, only to find it empty. A trap. Explosions triggered at just the right moment, collapsing the structure behind them, cutting off their escape. Another precise attack eliminated the ones still outside. One by one, the Council's elite warriors fell, not in glorious battle, but in a war they never saw coming. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the amusement had vanished. The delegates watched in stunned silence as the simulation unfolded. The human forces, given inferior technology, fewer resources, and a battlefield stacked against them, weren't just holding their own. They were winning. Elias stood among them, watching without reaction. He had known this outcome from the moment the simulation began. The others, however, were only beginning to understand. The alien forces were unraveling. What had started as a showcase of superiority had turned into a slow, methodical dismantling. The Council's warriors, once confident, were now hesitant, their movements riddled with uncertainty. Every attempt to regroup was met with another disruption. Every fallback position was already compromised. Every counterattack was anticipated before it even began. They had assumed technology would secure their victory, that numbers, formations, and centuries of war doctrine would hold the advantage. But none of it mattered when their enemy refused to fight on their terms. A squad of Brakari attempted to reinforce a failing flank, coordinating through their encrypted comms. The message never reached its destination. Their signals had been intercepted, their transmissions scrambled. They were isolated now, vulnerable. The humans didn't engage in a direct firefight, they set a false retreat, baiting the Brakari into a narrow corridor. The moment they pursued, a well-placed incendiary charge sealed their fate. From the Council's viewing platform, the silence was suffocating. What had been a spectacle was now a lesson they hadn't expected to learn. The Vraxi snipers, positioned at high ground, had been ineffective. Their targets never exposed themselves long enough for a clean shot. They tried adapting, switching to heat signatures. But the humans had already accounted for that, using the environment itself to mask their movements. One by one, the Vraxi positions were compromised, their vantage points now their graves. The Zeldar warlord, who had laughed the loudest before the simulation began, had stopped speaking entirely. He watched as his warriors, renowned for their brute force tactics, were systematically reduced to nothing. Strength had no meaning when their enemy refused to engage them in a way they could overpower. The council's best generals scrambled for explanations. This must be an anomaly, one muttered. They're using unconventional, unsanctioned tactics, another insisted, as if that somehow made the victory less real. Elias remained silent, watching. There was no need to respond. The truth was unfolding in front of them. The final stand came sooner than expected. What remained of the alien forces had gathered, desperately trying to consolidate into one last stronghold. It was a logical move. Create a defensive perimeter. Hold out until conditions changed. It was also predictable. The humans had no intention of storming the stronghold. They had already won. Instead of attacking, they cut off supply lines, jammed remaining communication channels, isolated them, starved them of information, turned their own defenses against them. What should have been a last stand became a slow, crushing realization that resistance was meaningless. Minutes later, the simulation ended. The war was over. Humanity had won. The chamber remained silent, every delegate staring at the results, unwilling to accept them. The council had seen many wars, but none like this. They had expected brute force. They had encountered something far worse, strategy beyond their understanding. Elias finally spoke. You assumed our wars were chaos, that they lacked refinement. What you failed to understand is that every war we fought to survive. No one had a response, because for the first time, they understood. The weight of silence in the chamber was suffocating. The delegates, once brimming with arrogance, now sat motionless, their eyes fixed on the final simulation report. The council's best warriors had not just lost, they had been dismantled, exposed, outmaneuvered at every turn. The numbers didn't lie. The kill ratios, the tactical efficiency, the flawless execution. Humanity had won with inferior weapons, outdated armor, and fewer resources. The implications were undeniable. The Zeldar warlord, who had dismissed the challenge with a sneer, now clenched his jaw. His kind had built their reputation on brute dominance, on winning through force. Yet force had failed. He turned toward Elias, searching for something, an excuse, an explanation, a way to dismiss what had just happened. But there was none. A Brakari strategist, known for his cold calculations, reviewed the battle data over and over. The humans hadn't just fought differently. They had anticipated every move, adjusted before the enemy even realized they needed to. The simulation's AI had analyzed probability trees based on past council war records. In nearly every case, the human forces had already counted the predicted outcomes before they even happened. The Vraxi representative broke the silence first. Your tactics are unnatural. There was no insult in his tone, only quiet disbelief. You fight without formation, without rigid structure. Your strategies are fluid, adaptive, unlike anything we have encountered. Elias remained still. He had expected this moment, the realization that had taken humanity centuries to master. The art of war was not just about strength. It was not just about technology. It was about control, of information, of perception, of fear. Another delegate spoke, hesitating. You won with fewer resources, weaker weapons, no technological advantage. How? Elias finally turned to them. Because we had to. His voice was calm, firm. Every war we fought against extinction. We were never the strongest, never the fastest, never the most advanced. We were outgunned, outnumbered, always at a disadvantage. And yet we endured. We adapted. We learned how to turn every weakness into an advantage, every battlefield into a weapon. He paused, scanning the room. And now you understand. No one argued. There was nothing to argue. Some of the council members glanced at each other, unspoken concerns passing between them. If humans could achieve victory under such conditions, what did that mean for the future? What did it mean for their own security? The Zeldar warlord finally exhaled, his voice low. We underestimated you. He struggled with the words. That will not happen again. Elias nodded. That's the first intelligent thing you've said today. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the delegates began to acknowledge what they had just witnessed. Some were wary. Some were impressed. Others afraid. The Galactic Council had laughed at humanity's wars. They weren't laughing anymore.